Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 87 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, we have a very special guest. Brendan White is joining us to talk about all things under the sun related to DWI, to running a DWI practice. So we'll see where the conversation goes. Brendan was a former trooper, so he lives in Arizona, practices in Arizona, has a statewide practice that focuses on criminal defense as well as on some civil cases as well. Brandon, it's been cool to get to know you over the last couple of years. We've been Facebook pals and been involved through various things that CRISP has run platform-wise. But it's always fun to see the stuff that you post. You bring a tremendous amount of energy, and it is exciting to be able to talk to you on the show today.
Thank you, Counselor. It's been awesome getting to know you as well, too. I always say, unless you've been through the struggle of opening and hanging your own shingle and been through the roller coaster ride, it's a brother and sisterhood. We all got to sit together. So there's that mutual respect. And I've seen you grow your practice. So hats off to you too.
Yeah, no, we were just talking about before we got on the podcast. Brandon and I both had good years in 2021. And so, maybe to just kind of give us a little background, in terms of what, growing your practice has looked like, where you started out. Tell us just a little bit about kind of where did the, law offices of Brandon White, where did that start? And where are you now?
Yeah, we started back in 2015, and I had just ended a decade-long law enforcement career with the State Patrol. So we call it Department of Public Safety. It's our highway patrol, state police, and hung my own shingle out as a new lawyer. So I did what all the other lawyers told you not to do. Don't go hang your shingle out. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
And then when you do, definitely, get some experience first. Nope, I went right into it, and I learned. And it's grown now to, we've got 4 lawyers going on 5, statewide practice, growing our team. Now we're up to like 8 or 9 team members, and it's just going to be a
That's awesome.
Year. So it's been a while.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of, kind of the decision to go into criminal law, was that kind of directly related to the law enforcement background, or what was kind of the thought process even of going into law enforcement originally?
I've always loved, and it sounds so corny. It sounds like I'm a 6-year-old asking you what I want to be when I grow up. But, I wanted to be a lawyer and a police officer. I was fascinated by the system that we have here. It's not perfect. You know this. My God, you battle it every day. It's a far from perfect system. If you want justice, it's far from a courtroom. But it's still the best in the world. And it just fascinates me what we have here. And law enforcement took me first. I spent a decade there, and I was ready for the next chapter. And completing my educational journey was calling my name. I went back and got licensed. It was at that point that I had some perspective. Do I want to sit here and write traffic tickets for another 10 years, or do I want to go and help some good people? And I made the leap. And I guess that's really this humble story. I never really wanted to do criminal defense. People were assuming, oh, you're a cop. You want to be a prosecutor. No, I know prosecutors. No, they're not happy. You want to be a defense attorney. No, the whole system. I was just frustrated with it, But then good people that I know close to me reached out, took some criminal defense cases, and just had a knack for it. And I had that empathy where it's another human being across the table from you to take the worst day of their life and help them move on, become a better person, learn from it, or defend their rights if they're falsely accused, which happens far too often. And so it's now become a passion project. And it's really interesting how in life, you enter a career field with one mindset and have a completely different change.
I think what we'll spend a good amount of time, talking about was the, experience that you have in highway patrol and how that's influenced what you kind of take away and how you prepare for cases as a criminal defense attorney. So What trainings did you go through specifically in your time as a trooper that were DWI specific, or that you thought were helpful in terms of doing those type of investigations?
Back when I went through the academy, we went through the Arizona Basic, Law Enforcement Academy just to get the certification. It's pretty much a 40-hour week block of impairment and DUI. But do they focus all on DUI during that 40 hours? No. I would say it's more of a crash course for officers, and then here, go forth and conquer. And then there's approximately 10 to 12 hours of field sobriety tests, training, and then certification. But I will tell you that it is vastly insufficient. And I think a lot of officers come out overly confident in their abilities and how to interpret impaired drivers. So yeah, it was more of a crash course if I had to sum it up. And it really hasn't gotten any better, at least here in Arizona, for law enforcement officers in that additional training baseline. They have to seek additional specialty training once they're out, but that's on the individual officer to do so. That's not required. So
right. Yeah, I guess in terms of the, I guess then kind of landing and just figuring it out on your own. What did that look like in terms of once you started actually, conducting traffic stops and DWI investigations? Did you go directly into kind of the night force, or what was the
Yeah. Right out of training, I went in my field training, and my entire shift went straight into midnights. And so I would deal with impaired drivers, suspected impaired drivers for, several per day. And I will tell you that my investigations got better as I went along, but as a new officer, there's so many missteps, oversights, not following the field sobriety test correctly. And I cringe at some of the investigations early on that probably stemmed to and ended up in convictions, because it was any defense attorney would have probably torn it apart.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And it's just not right. I think there should be better training for baseline officers, and that should be continuous throughout their career as well. So not enough is what I would sum it up as.
Yeah, I really think that's a hard transition for most officers that are coming out of, basic training, or from, in North Carolina, the Highway Patrol. They call it basically the academy. And so coming out of that environment, it really is, you're just kind of thrown to the fire. You may have a supervising officer for a limited period of time, but really the hands-on training, comes once you start doing investigations. And that is, where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So I feel like there's got to be, I think that most officers would benefit from a little bit more kind of in the field training and seeing things kind of happen in real time, because it's just happening so fast. And because in comparison to what you're learning when you're going through, the field sobriety test course and the PowerPoints and all that, it's happening so much more, rapidly once you are doing it in the field.
In Arizona, for instance, we have a standardized field sobriety test worksheet. It's kind of standardized across all police departments and state patrol, that an officer really should be notating, as notes. And it's got the walk and turn, the one leg stand, the Romberg modified, the finger count, all of that. And they're supposed to be using that as they progress through the field sobriety test. But that's not necessarily usually what's happening. The officer's just observing, and at the end, we'll fill out the standardized field sobriety test an hour or two later, even the next day, and it may not be accurate depiction of what they observed during that, during the driver's performance. So there's just that sloppiness, I guess I would call it. Not every officer, I will say that, not every officer, but so I look for, it's one of the things that we look for when we onboard a brand new DUI case, is we pick apart that investigation, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a sloppy investigation, and we can start building pretty good marks on that. You know what I mean? Just, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, as you indicated, you got better at doing these investigations over time. So, all of that training and time that you're doing this, in terms of some of the things that you focused on, as you got more experience, the way that you would ask questions or the way that you would conduct an investigation, What were some of the things that you, kind of changed in terms of your investigation style, the way that you ask questions that you, feel like, created a higher chance of conviction in the courtroom? Because I think it's important to know kind of when a DWI investigation is being done well.
I would say I would sum it up as I standardized as much as I could, meaning I took every DUI investigation, same timeline and the same line of events as every other one. I would just keep it consistent. So I knew that I would be building my case from the minute we on view the vehicle. Even before that, if we had actually an all call from dispatch asking, hey, there's a possible impaired driver, 911 caller behind, I'd be starting my investigation at that point, and then on viewing the driving behavior, I would just keep it standard across the board. And then so when it came time to defense interviews, I knew when I did what within each investigation. Does that make sense? Because I did it the same every time. It took me a while to learn how to do that, but I finally did, and now I knew I wouldn't miss anything. I had a complete investigation.
I think one of the things that I saw recently was getting that camera on as soon as possible. And I just told an officer the other day in the courtroom, I was like, you did yourself a favor by flipping that camera on immediately, because the officer had followed my client for probably about 4 miles. And, the driving kind of right before the stop was not terrible, but the driving, kind of earlier on the video was pretty bad. And so he had flipped his camera on, was following for a while, waited until he got up to the next exit. And I think he was just honestly looking for additional bad driving, but, waited a couple miles till he came to an off ramp and then initiated the blue lights. And if he had just, initiated the blue lights without that manual camera, probably the video would have looked pretty good from my side of things. It would not have been that bad. Obviously they could testify about whatever they personally observed, but it's going to be inconsistent with what you would have seen on video. So I told him he had done himself a favor by getting that camera on early. I think the other thing that I've seen officers, do well, and this might be particularly true with troopers, is that I feel like some people that come out of the academy, and this may be true in terms of law enforcement generally, but have this very militaristic, kind of like, approach to the interaction with the driver. And I feel like the best police officers, the best troopers, are the ones that just want to be your best friend. And they're starting to ask you all these tell me what's going on. Tell me where were you tonight? Was it that be my friend on the DWI and the things. That is a good style.
Take my hand. I'll take you for a journey.
That's right.
I'm going to be honest. Okay. And this is totally swallowing my pride saying this, but I was one of those troopers. I mean, you're so indoctrinated early on, right? That this is it's us versus them, folks. Yeah. Yeah. Don't turn your back and don't believe a word they say. They're all criminals. And that's the mentality. And when I got out, there's many, and you're going to laugh. I just look back. I was a 20-year-old kid. Many times the first year where I'd be like, not on my highway. You don't, who says that? Not on my highway. It's just, you realize, though, that's a human being that you're stopping. That could be your brother, your sister, your friend, your cousin, could be you. And, you have the burden. They don't carry the burden. And so it's just, It was a mind shift. But you're totally right. There is that push to be, militaristic. But you are correct. Like, I think I learned in my law enforcement careers that, you get more bees with honey than vinegar, and treat them with respect. And half the time I couldn't get people to stop talking. I would even have to remind them of their Miranda rights. And whoa, you understand that anything you're telling me, I almost felt bad. Like, stop, you know what I mean? It can be used against you. So you hit it on the nail there for sure.
Yeah. I could see you being, once that switch happened, I could see you being pretty awesome at bringing out that conversation, because you're an easy person to talk to, Brandon. So I think that is, I think that's one of those things that, again, on video, it's such a, difference, because what happens when you bring that like militaristic attitude, when you see that on video, the person that's driving, like, shells up and they're like, you know what, I'm just going to talk to my attorney about this. I'm not going to, divulge anything. And the person that wants to be your bud, like you said, I mean, they'll just keep talking until.
Yeah. Life story. I can't tell you how many life stories I just heard on the way to the jail, because I would work in a primarily rural area. So when we book someone into jail and process them, which I feel so bad now, I'm earning back my sins, I promise. I'm attorney now, okay? I promise. But we get to know them, and by the time I got to these jails and it would process them, I've spent hours with these individuals,
right,
and hearing their life story, and I'm like, oh man, like this is I would give them advice, like hurry up and get a lawyer, make sure you do this and that, and you'll be taken care of. You'll get past this, that kind of thing. I was being cheerleader by the time I was taken to jail, but it's because I cared. They got to me. You know what I mean? It really does. It changed your mindset.
Yeah, no, I think it does. I mean, and if you've got that kind of good relationship with people and you like dealing, talking with people, I think you get to hear more about somebody's life story than probably their spouse, their priest. I mean, you probably got the more information about that individual by the end of that 3-hour session, because they're just at such a low point, and it's almost like a verbal explosion of how did I end up in this particular situation. So it's like an out loud thought process going on.
It's just verbal. Yes. Diarrhea. Totally. Completely. And I mean, so you can't live under a rock if you didn't say that would not impact you. You know what I mean? Over time, where it's just like, whoa, like it's, we're one or two possibly bad decisions away from being in that.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
And that person has to have their rights protected. They deserve that, a fair shake. It does not define them. It doesn't define their life.
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's, totally the same mindset we have. And I think, just hearing that from you in terms of literally, this is what the person that is charged and our clients, this is what they are, doing a lot of times hours before they call the office. They're literally, giving their full life story to the person that is supposed to be kind of their enemy, so to speak, right? Like this person that's on the other side of the V, they recognize they did something, they did something wrong a lot of the time, and will start, communicating about, again, everything under the sun. I feel like for us as attorneys to kind of hear that and know that is something that, again, that's the mindset that they are in when they call us is so powerful, because we have a real opportunity to help people kind of change their life at that point that they are at this low point of being, devastated from their decision, the arrest, the fact they went to jail. Now they got to figure out what the consequences are going to be. You have such a tremendous opportunity in that first moment of call to change somebody's life. And you can, exercise that opportunity, or you can waste it, but there really may be nobody else that they can go to help them exercise that opportunity for change.
Amen to that. I mean, it really does put the counselor of law. That's the other side of our duty. I mean, what awesome responsibility do we have, an opportunity to, get that person through that rocky point in life and get them back on to being a productive member of society. Like this is just a blip and they move on, because life is too damn short. You know what I mean? So I love that. I love that approach that your guys' office takes that too. Would you agree too that, any new team members, so when you go to grow your team, I know when we are interviewing new applicants to join our team, that question comes up. We want to see that empathy.
Absolutely. Oh, right? Yeah.
To humanize. I don't want them thinking, oh, this is guilty. No. We're a defense firm. They're paying us to do a job. They're confided. We have an ethical and legal responsibility, but also as a human.
Yeah, no, I think that is a major sign that's been a major sign for us in terms of somebody that's not going to be a good culture fit. Right. Is anybody that, just doesn't appear empathetic or in particular is like, asking questions that you can kind of interpret in your own mind of like, how can you justify, working with these people? And so we really try, in the interview, also, outside, the interview in the team, but we try to focus on how we are helping the client, right? Like this is, what we exist for, is the people that are walking in the door, the hope that we can bring these people, the goal for us is to kind of see that weight lifted from the time that the person walks into the office or gets on the phone versus when they go out with, at least some of the questions that they have being answered. And you can see people in an interview that get fired up about that and are like, yeah, man, I'm on board with helping people.
Yeah.
And other people that are still just kind of like, how are you helping addicts? And that, that's how you just not all in on it. If you're not all in on trying to help change people's lives, it's not going to be a good fit.
No, because I mean, it's just such a vulnerable time in someone's life that you can't take advantage of that situation beyond your ethical duty. I know we have that, but if you don't seize the moment to try to improve that person's life and help them, leave them better off than when they came to you, then we're not doing our job. We should be finding another profession, So that's really neat that you look for that too when you're adding team members to your group, because that's that passion project.
It is, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you want people on the team that are on fire for that same cause. Do you guys have anything else that you're specifically looking for on the team member side of things?
Being able to show that empathy, open communication, not judgmental, right? Treating, doesn't matter on the crime that person is being charged with or allegedly charged with, or, treating everyone equally, but also getting to know them. I'm going to be honest, 9 times out of 10, we look more for the customer service side. I want to see people with a customer service experience, that hospitality management experience, that let me take you to a client journey that you're not expecting. Everyone has bad lawyer experiences when they come to you. They come to us with a wall up. We already expect that. We want to lower that wall and show them, listen, it's not the experience you know what I'm saying? Did you guys get
totally? Yeah, totally agree. I think, and this is not to say you don't, emphasize, we spend a lot of time, as a group of attorneys and as an entire team focusing on improving our knowledge of DWI law and what's going on in the courtroom, and making sure that we're, attending the, above and beyond in the CLE department, really trying to hone our craft. But at the end of the day, if you've got a client that you got a great result for in the courtroom, but you have bad, customer service, your client experience is not good, you're getting a negative review. I mean, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day what the result is, and vice versa. If you are working like mad for a client and communicating with them and following up, preparing them every step of the way, flooding with information, and then, the judge ultimately doesn't rule in your favor, that client's still going to come out and be like, I could not have asked for, better representation. And, thank you very much. So that's the focus. I totally agree with the hospitality background.
I mean, because you agree, we fight like hell, James, but sometimes we cannot promise an outcome. We can take you on this journey and we can check all the boxes and be shoulder to shoulder with you and make sure you got the best possible representation. But you're not paying us for an outcome, because I can't promise that. I will give you the experience with that. And I found that to be true early on in my practice. I had, you go through some attorneys just to kind of find your culture fit. And I had a great attorney, genius, got great outcomes. He just wasn't customer service oriented and just wasn't likable by clients, but got great outcomes. So do you see the dichotomy there? So it's like, and so even at the end of that journey, some of the clients were just not as happy as they probably could have been, even though they got a good outcome, because they just didn't feel like they were relatable with the attorney. It's the customer service experience, I tell you.
It is. Oh, it absolutely is.
But that's great that you guys have that mentality as well, because that's going to resonate with your clients. I'm sure it does. And it sets your reputation apart, So.
Yeah, I think it's just something that is fun to kind of constantly be working on as well. How do you improve that client service that you're offering, because there's a million different ways to improve it, right? It's a project that you're never done with. And so I think that also is inspiring to the rest of the team of, we can constantly be getting better. And that, the small things are really what make that happen. It's not these overnight, like life-changing things in the office that all of a sudden it's like the light bulb goes on. Normally it's these small little tweaks here and there in terms of how we're communicating.
we have a core value actually too, and it's better than yesterday, because that's
awesome. Yeah.
Look to seek to self-improve yourself and then help improve a process for the firm, give an improved client experience too. So I would say another thing we look at too is the ability to be professional and respectful of law enforcement, prosecutors, and court staff. I mean it. Listen, clients come and go. We love our clients. We're going to do our due diligence, but it's always going to be brothers and sisters of the bar. And
Yes.
so if you got one reputation, but our fellow, prosecutors out here or cops out here, we have a good working relationship, but they know that in the end, we will kick their butt in court. You know what I'm saying? We will call you on a bad judgment call.
Yeah.
But we can still go, and be cordial with each other, professional, and, even during defense interviews and stuff like that. But don't cross me, because we have a duty to do, or we're always going to choose our client. Does that make sense? It doesn't always have to be us versus them.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think if you've got somebody that can't work with the other side, that's going to be a problem in the long run. I think one of my favorite things is when law enforcement tell me that they listen to the podcast. I've had a couple of local law enforcement and
awesome.
Park ranger a few months back that was like, man, I just love listening to the episodes. And I think, to me, part of our job really is helping to be that education gap that comes from not having all the training in law enforcement, so as unfortunately, if you don't get good training in the academy or whatever courses that you've kind of taken, you're getting educated in the courtroom, and it's not always the most fun experience to go through. But at the end of the day, if you do it in a respectful manner, I've had a number of officers that have come up afterwards and been like, I really appreciate kind of the things that you were pointing out. I'm going to go back and look at this or that piece, or, I didn't realize that, was the way that was. I'm going to go back and look at the manual, appreciate, kind of the time that you put into it. So again, I think if you do it with a respectful tone, there's really, the end game is for us to have good DWI investigations going on, so that when it comes to that felony death case or whatever the situation is, that hopefully the state has done their job. I mean, if there is a case that's important, that the officer has done a really good investigation, and doesn't have a situation come up where you lose just because the officer was sloppy. I mean, that's the end game.
I think an officer in his or her career has a choice to make what kind of officer they want to be, and either one, open to criticism and constant constructive criticism and improvement, or it's my way or the highway and limit your knowledge. I will tell you, the single most, I guess, I've been taught probably the most by defense attorneys when I was an officer, and it usually stemmed from getting my butt kicked at a defense interview. All of a sudden, there were so many holes in my investigations, or at trial, just getting crossed, just destroyed. And you know what? I never took it personally. Half the time, James, you're right. I would go up to my defense attorneys and shake their hand and go, "Listen, you taught me a valuable lesson. I'll do better. I'll do better going forward." And I went back every time, and constantly my DUI investigations got better because of that defense attorney, because that learning experience. It was embarrassing.
It is, yeah.
That's how you get better, because we owe it to defendants. So do they. Officers owe it to defendants. If you're going to charge it the right way, investigate it the right way.
Exactly. And I mean, I think, it's one of those things that works the same for defense attorneys as well. Because basically, as we, as we're starting out and having our first trial, I think one thing that keeps a lot of young attorneys from trying cases is that they don't want to be embarrassed in the courtroom. They don't want to go through this situation where it's like, I don't want to look stupid in front of the judge. I don't want to say something that I, at the wrong time or not present an argument. And so there's a shyness of getting in the courtroom, and you kind of just have to dive in and make some mistakes and be embarrassed on your end of things to kind of start to gain that experience of, okay, this is just part of the process. Everybody has to go through it. I'm going to prepare like mad, but there's still going to be things that I miss. And same thing in terms of better. I love the better than yesterday because there's something I learned on every case, something that I could have done better in terms of investigation end of things, something that I could have done better in terms of trial preparation. So, I think it's more of a universal mindset than it is in terms of what profession that you're in.
And I try to, take that and incorporate it within our firm. I think it was a recommendation from Chris. You had mentioned Chris earlier, but we did a book club, and it's just like it sounds. We chose a book as a firm, and
that's awesome.
We did Cy Wakeman's No Ego. Okay,
we've done the same thing. So high five on that front.
Yes. Okay. Good. And we would do, you guys do chapter breakdowns, right? And we would just discuss chapter by chapter about taking personal responsibility. And it is amazing when you reflect in your own life and experiences how much ego plays a role. And I'll be honest,
it does.
Played a huge role in my life. It goes back to not on my highway, James, right? That was my ego talking. That was insecurity. That's what that was, So I was very happy with how receptive my team took that. How was your experience on that?
Oh, it was great. So we started kind of doing some book review or reading books together during the beginning of the pandemic. We read a couple of books, John Maxwell's Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and then No Ego. And the No Ego book is just fantastic. I highly recommend that one. It is a really good self-reflection tool. I mean, really, I think all of us took more away from kind of like applying it to our own lives than than anything else. But I think it's really important to have those regular review periods. So we don't do as much in the discussion end currently as we were doing at that time, but we do have like a quarterly book that gets sent to the whole team. So you got to be growing. If the mind's not growing, it's gonna hurt the whole team. I mean, everybody's got to be growing together. I think that's really important in terms of the culture.
And I mean, you had mentioned you have, other defense counsel watching this podcast. You have troopers, law enforcement, probably some judges and things like that. That No Ego goes across all board.
It does. Absolutely.
We all take it in our own role within this system that we have and apply it to be better than you were yesterday. You know what I mean? It's amazing because you open yourself up for learning at that point.
Yeah, you absolutely do. No, I again, it's one of the best reads that we've done as a team. I mean, just because it's so helpful in eliminating drama from the workplace. She talks a lot about drama, and that is such a, I've worked in a lot of different spaces, sometimes without drama and sometimes with, and it sometimes seems haphazard in terms of where you're going to find that. But I don't think that's any accident that there's drama in some workspaces and it's gone in others. So it's important to kind of get to the underlying reasons of that.
And I think it's even applicable to client consults.
Yes.
You have someone that's going through the worst day of their life. Some of them never even had a preview into the criminal justice system. And now it feels like it's us, versus them. And they're already high strung, they're stressed. They're not thinking clearly rational. There's some points in that book that, get you to realize that, don't add to the frustration, provide that calming reassurance.
Yes.
More than be that rock.
Oh, yes.
Be more than just a lawyer that's going to file a notice of appearance and get a plea. You know what I mean? Give them that experience and make sure that you have, they know you have their back and bring that calm to the storm. So.
Yeah, totally agree. So, we kind of looked at some of the, positives in terms of what do law enforcement do well, with that law enforcement background, and in terms of investigating, looking at discovery, or in terms of kind of walking through where the attack points exist. What are some of the biggest, recurring holes that you see in terms of poor investigations?
And I've actually seen this personally as an officer, writing reports in the report room, looking over at other officers writing up their DUI reports. Names don't match. They'll go to a previous DUI narrative. When they make the arrest, they'll go to the previous one they had saved, and they'll start changing names so they don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yes.
Whoa. So many issues with that, right? Because then all the other facts, the field sobriety performances, our officers break down in paragraph form in the report, each field sobriety test as well. So we've seen a lot of holes in that department too. So we look for that. Timelines don't match up.
Let me just ask that, because I've definitely seen that on reports in the past where there is you can tell that this was just a copy and paste. What is your then attack point for that? Like, how do you kind of cross-examine along that front? What does that look like in terms of trying to bring that out?
Even before cross-examine, we will do a defense interview 9 times out of 10. Not to give all the secrets, but do the defense interview, and really, I want to lock that officer down in that story.
Okay.
I also, to be fair, James, I want to give that officer an out. I want to give the officer a chance to clarify, because you don't know what you don't know. Right. On my end, right? I kind of want the truth. How much do you really recall of this investigation this night 4 months ago? How much do you remember standing and observing HGN, the one leg stand? How many cues did you actually watch, or were you too busy taking notes? Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
Because all I'm seeing, officer, is that in your narrative, it shows a Mrs. Williams. Who the hell's a Mrs. Williams?
Right.
Was that your caller? Who's that? And so we'll lock them into the story. A lot of times we're able to present that to the prosecution and use that as leverage. Okay. It doesn't necessarily have to be a motion to suppress yet or anything like that. We try to do the path of least resistance first, try to approach it from a collaborative standpoint. If we're not getting the change that we need, then obviously there's piss poor investigation. We'll start filing motions.
Right.
That's how we do it. We usually approach it from an officer standpoint, but I don't rush into it just because I see someone's name misspelled or something. I want the officer to give me a chance to tell me his or her side of the story from recollection of that night.
Yeah. I just haven't seen that a couple of times. So in North Carolina, we don't have really a, kind of an interview discovery process. Basically, you can go up to an officer and kind of, talk with them informally, on the court hearing. But in terms of the, real time to kind of talk to an officer about the report, it really is during trial, during the cross-examination. So, that's something I've been trying to kind of figure out different strategies for bringing out that like copy and paste mentality. Do you regularly take a narrative and use it as the baseline for another, for your new narrative? Why are these, names matching up? Why are you, indicating that you did these 2 field sobriety tests that actually don't show up on video? Is that because you're just copy and pasting? How many other areas in the report are copy and pasted? Can you differentiate, what was true from the last investigation to this one?
Completely. I mean, not to try to embarrass them, but I mean, my God, we need to present this to the jury. I would, suggest even just having them read their report out loud, and then a name pops up, and then we can talk about, who's that in this storyline, and leave it open-ended for them to kind of explain.
Right. Yeah.
It's an error. Oh, that is an error. Okay, so now we're hurting the credibility of the officer. If this is sloppy, if this is an error, where else did you make an error at? Maybe notating the BAC.
Right.
You know what I mean? Maybe 1 less or 2 less cues on the HGN than what you notated. That's kind of how I would approach it. Have you tried that? Is that on as far as leverage and credibility?
Yeah, it's been difficult, I feel like, to get officers to kind of lock in about the rest of the report. It's just the name. So, I think the best way that it's been able to be utilized is, in addition to having the name, you also then have the video to start to show that there's either tests that weren't done, or, if they're saying there was a portable breath test and that's not on the video. Cause I'll have clients that, I'll send them the report and they're like, I literally never did that test. And at first my thought was, well, you're drunk. I mean, you probably don't remember doing that. You probably don't remember doing that test. Like, I mean, some people don't have but after this happened 3 or 4 times, it was like, well, this is a recurring problem, right? This is happening. So, didn't mean to derail you on that front, because I know you had some other kind of hot topics, but I think it is something that's interesting that comes up seemingly pretty routinely.
Right. And then asking, officers too. I don't know, like I said, you don't have the ability to, in your state, to communicate with the officer as much as I think we do. We have a right to a defense interview here, to lock them into that story as well too. But also another issue here, and I'm not sure how it is in your state, but we have a list of basically those that have been accused in law enforcement or prosecutors of lying before, caught in a lie, material or non-material, dishonesty, and we call it the Brady list here. And so We check every officer, even a backup officer, witness officers, anything, supplemental officers to that list. And it's been very disturbing how many are on that list, and yet they're the ones that authored this report.
Right.
It by itself is not grounds to throw it out. They're still a licensed officer, but we start looking very closely in that investigation. And you bring up a really good point. In those cases, we really have the client, him or herself, review the report. We sit down, recreate it. How much do you recall of this night? Any of this sounds totally off the wall. They were there, you weren't. And then use that as kind of leverage. But it happens more often than you can count. We even had a crime lab tech that was doing the blood.
Gosh, that's crazy.
On the list. Have been accused of falsifying reports in the past and no longer works there. But yet they're proceeding with a DUI conviction based on that. Come on. You know what I mean? I'm a former officer, and that just pisses me off. That's just sloppiness all the way around. So
I totally agree. I think that the more that you focus in on those little details, that's really where you can start to then create a crack in the whole case. I mean, again, I think it'd be easy to just say, well, the name is not correct. That must have just been a mistake, and not kind of realize, well, this is a copy and pasted narrative where the officer probably is going in and changing some of those things. But again, the difficulty becomes, which ones were changed, which weren't. How can you differentiate between, what you put in the report that wasn't an error versus, something that was, because the name's a pretty big deal. That's a pretty big,
right.
If you're gonna recreate this thing, that's a pretty big place to start. And again, I've seen that, multiple times in the past where that's happened. Go ahead, Brandon.
And then with us, it's obviously actual physical control is a huge one that we see a lot of sloppiness around, and how much was really observed by the officer seeing the defendant behind the wheel.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And especially in alleged hit runs or collision related violations, where by the time the 911 caller called in, but by the time the officer showed up, the defendant was walking around the car.
Right.
Hey, where's your physical control? And so I've seen them glare over in narratives. I arrived on scene, made contact with the driver, and they just skipped over, the establishing actual physical control. And sometimes we'd be able to pop holes into that, because really when we got back to it, you never saw him behind the wheel, and your 911 caller never stuck around to actually see.
Yes.
You could have drank a beer while you were waiting, that kind of thing. It's just sloppy police work. If you don't have it, you don't have it. And I remember many times in my career that happened, James. I did not have a solid DUI. I did not have the elements. I'm going to say this. I knew the person was impaired in driving, but I have a burden to meet. I couldn't meet that burden. I would not charge that person with DUI.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? It's not officers. Not a lot of officers feel that way. So
yeah, no, I think that's, kind of a unique way. I feel like, the general perspective that I see, and I don't know that this is necessarily even the wrong perspective from law enforcement, but, I think the general perspective is, I'll get what evidence that I can, and then the DA's mess to deal with at that point, right? Like, basically I did what I could, I mean, it's investigated, but I do think that, having that, understanding of discretion in certain cases, and being able to say, I just don't have the evidence that I need. I think that there is a value, both at the investigation level through police, but also at the prosecutor's level, that at the end of the day, the goal is for justice to be served. And if there's not enough evidence, there's just not enough evidence. It's not as though I've got to go stick it to somebody. It's, if there's not enough evidence, there's not enough evidence.
It's changing the narrative back to that. You're completely right. If the elements are not met, move on to the next one. that's it,
Yeah. We have a couple of pretty good recent Court of Appeals cases on that kind of driving issue, and the timing of driving versus the timing that the person came into contact with police. And, one of the things that is, important in those cases that I see officers fail to do all the time is to just, ask for a time frame of driving. When did you last consume alcohol? Were you driving? Have you had anything to drink since the time of driving? It's, the accident is so bad, or there's, somebody's so excited about actually finding the suspect that they believe is involved. Now the whole investigation goes towards impairment. And it's like, if I can just show that this person is impaired, then the game is over at that point, as opposed to kind of really more focusing on connection to time of driving. And so that's definitely something that we look at a lot.
And do you see some success in that? Do you see some holes where there's some major gaps in some of the cases that?
The two cases in North Carolina that have been, utilized a lot, but I think generally by the defense bar here, is State versus Eldred and State versus Kraft. And effectively the court in those cases, zeroes in on, the standard of proof in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we can kind of guess all day long as to what has happened. But if that, time frame hasn't been established, and, when the alcohol was consumed versus time of driving, and was this person actually the one driving, then it's not the court's job to be, guessing, even if it's a really good guess, right? Like that, even if it's that really good guess, that's not the court's job. So I do see a lot of holes on the officer end of things. And I think, again, it's because it's so like focused on, I've got to be able to show this person was impaired. I have to be able to show the person was impaired, when really it's like, well, yeah, he was impaired, but we don't know, we don't know.
Being impaired ain't illegal.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, you forget the other part of it here. It's like an iRobot. My responses are limited. You must ask the right questions. It's like, come on, guys, and that's where, like you said, giving them more training up front, especially in something as complex as DUI.
Correct. Yeah.
Giving those newer officers that baseline additional training, but also the requirement to refresh as case law changes. You know what I mean? Half the time we were always late in the game, where I was, by the time the statute, something changed in the legislative sessions and something came into effect, it would take a while for baseline officers to actually start following the rules. It was crazy. And
it is crazy. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. I mean, and, I think that there's even somewhat of a delay within, the prosecutors and defense bar when there's a case that comes out, or when there's a statute that changes. But yeah, there's times, where you'll see a 5 or 10 year delay before it seems like law enforcement is getting updated that this is now an additional issue. And it would be interesting to see how that could be better utilized in terms of in-service training, because that just doesn't seem to exist in most places.
Does North Carolina have a requirement of mandatory jail time for first time baseline DUI?
No.
Like Arizona?
Yes.
No.
So you can, the judge has the discretion, on a first offense that doesn't involve like injury or something to somebody else, has the discretion to give community service in lieu of jail time. So there's not, a mandatory requirement for jail time on a first offense.
Our standard's 10 days. Normally all but one will be suspended, but no matter what, if you're pleading to a DUI, you're going to get that 1 day in jail. And that's how harsh it is. Arizona writes it right into the statute. So yeah, I actually agree with North Carolina's approach. I actually like that. I know in some states was it Washington, Oregon, it could be automatic diversion for the first impairment charge.
Right.
So
I think more and more states will move in that direction. I feel like, giving people in North Carolina, the way that it is here, you can't have any type of, DUI conviction, or really traffic related conviction, all the way down to a speeding ticket, expunged. If it's a conviction, then it's just a permanent conviction that stays forever on the record. And I feel like, the trend generally is, if somebody makes a mistake when they're 19 years old, it really shouldn't impact their life when they're 35, trying to kind of advance their career, better their family. I mean, just at some point, this has got to kind of fall off. So I expect there'll be more and more moves either into diversion or expunction. But yeah, what does that look like out in Arizona?
I don't know. They're with COVID, I will say there's some movement. We're allowing like home detention, or allowing to serve your 1 day in another jurisdiction. And they've been easing the rules, but they're stuck with that 1 day. They really want to hammer it home. Right. You know what I mean? It's pretty harsh. It's definitely stigmatized here in this state. And I think that's trickled down to the legislator when they have written these laws. I don't see it changing anytime soon. Defense bar, obviously, we make our efforts, but it's one of the things that of all the misdemeanors,
it's a really hard thing to move against from a lawmaker's perspective, because it's a very difficult thing to champion the impaired driver. You know what I mean? Like, that's, it's, there's not a lobbyist group out there that is, kind of, even when everybody realizes, okay, people make mistakes. And if it's your first mistake, here's going to be the way that we make sure this doesn't happen again, but it doesn't have to, result in, jail time or, not being able to kind of get back and forth to your job, that type of thing. But, it's just a hard baseline to change, because somebody's got to be brave enough to put their name on a bill that's basically, let's eliminate jail time on DWI cases.
By the way, I'm not running for re-election next year, so
that's right.
Do that, right? I would say it's just amazing, though, that you can literally assault someone, cause injury, or shoplift in our state, get less consequences than being just over the legal limit because you had a little bit too many at the company party.
I totally agree. I mean, it's in North Carolina, it's one of the few charges where you have to give a written explanation as a prosecutor to why you're dismissing or reducing a DWI. So it's very rare to see a reduction or a dismissal. And again, you could dismiss a felony possession with intent to sell and deliver cocaine, just write VD on the back of the file, boom, it's gone. Doesn't make a lick of sense on that front in terms of some of the restrictions that are placed on that. But
it just, I don't know if you would agree, but just, it makes you more, it lights the fire under you even more to try to, fight for those that have been accused, because this is the one crime that kind of crosses all socioeconomic statuses, backgrounds, genders. It's just a cap in any one of us. So it doesn't define the person at all, especially first timers.
Yes. Yeah.
So we hope it changes. The defense bar is definitely, we're fighting over here.
Well, I love it, Brandon. Well, I appreciate very much you taking the time to come and talk and hang out. I really have enjoyed, again, following everything that you put out and talking with you in the times that we've been able to share ideas in the past. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you, James, for having me, man. And like I said, you're a wealth of information. Thank you for sharing your value and your constant content with our group. You've had some awesome guests on as well, too. So I will say this, and I'm not just telling you because I'm in front of you. A few of them, I've actually assigned some of the podcasts, some of my attorneys to watch.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. That's great.
I'm sharing
That's
the knowledge, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks very much for the feedback. Love it.
All right. Take care, James.
If you found the information in this podcast to be valuable, I simply ask that you pay it forward and share this podcast with another member of the legal community. Also, if you would leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you are listening on, I would greatly appreciate it.